Okay, welcome everyone. This is Joe Martin with Zeit. We're talking here on Inside the Workflow with Chris Kohler. Chris is a longtime colleague and friend and is currently the CMO at Twilio and just recently took the role. So I thought it could be interesting to kind of dig in on his perspective on such a large company, how he comes in and kind of organizes things. Chris, why don't you give a little background and then we'll kind of get into some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. It's great to be here. Like you said, I joined Twilio 3.5 months ago, something like that. Goes incredibly fast. Prior to that, I spent 6 years at Box and 5 years as CMO. And then we worked together at Adobe. I was at Adobe through acquisition almost 13 years in various different roles. So yeah, excited to talk. Lots of change going on from an industry perspective. Lots going on in my work as I'm sort of reimagining Twilio and how marketing plays an interesting role as well. So lots to chat about.
Awesome, love it. Yeah, and I would consider Twilio kind of one of those up and coming, tier 3, tier 2, tier 1, like up and coming can make a huge impact in the future of tech. How has kind of your time at Box, your time at Adobe really helped shape how you come into Twilio and get started with your vision?
Yeah, I mean, I think if, for those that don't know Twilio, like we're a $4.5 billion revenue business. We've been, primarily focused on developers and sort of, I would describe it as a PLG bottoms up approach, but we have a massive portfolio of products that we're really trying to tell a broader story of how we drive, better customer engagement across, with brands. But I think, spending time at Adobe is sort of the pinnacle of when you think about the importance of your brand, right? Adobe is at the top of my mind. So I think, that's just one where, I feel very passionately around how do we drive our brand and the importance of brand. I think tying that back into community, right? At Adobe, I spent a lot of time both on the creative side, but also the marketing or experience side of the business. How do you build this community that helps, tell your story and is really, really passionate about the capabilities and the problems you're solving, and really sort of inspiring this next generation, right? Of whether that's digital marketers or creatives, was really fun in my time there. And I think, as I transitioned to Box was a much smaller organization. And I think what we learned over time is how do you drive efficient growth, right? Really understanding the importance of your customer and your value proposition, right? Where do we fit in the market? What is our unique position as part of that? How do we play and win there? And then I think one of the things that we did really well at Box is I think communications as a capability is really an underutilized resource at many companies to really drive brand and awareness. And we were really, really good at that at Box. And I think that's one of the things I think Twilio's done a nice job as well. But I think there's, a notion of like, how do we tell our story in the marketplace, and comms is a really important piece of that as well.
We were talking earlier before we started just about kind of your emphasis on messaging and really product market fit and product marketing overall. What was kind of a pivotal moment, maybe at Box or at Adobe or whatever along the way, that you remember kind of hitting your sweet spot and knowing that you could come into basically any company and create this type of strategy?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone has sort of followed my background, like I joined Box, the number one question is like, I was VP of customer success. And people are like, okay, how is that, as a marketer, like that doesn't make any sense. But if you look at my background in Adobe, like I dealt with marketers all the time where we talk about best practices and everything else. So as I joined, I was in the, VP of customer success role for, I would say, just over a year. And I talked to lots of customers. And so it really teaches you the importance of really having a strong understanding of customers and their pain points and where we play. And what was clear when I was at, in that role at Box is our customers didn't understand our value proposition. And our messaging wasn't clear of like, why do we win? Why do they buy us? All of that. And so the first thing I did when I moved into the CMO role was really take a step back, get our head of product, our CEO, our head of sales, all in a room. And we're like, okay, we need to get super crisp on our value proposition, where we play, how we win, and get the whole company aligned around that. And so I think that was sort of this pivotal moment that, you put your customer hat on and you say, great, this is how we win in the marketplace. And quite frankly, I'm doing that now at Twilio as well, where we've got a broad set of portfolios. We have lots of different personas, right, that we engage in, and getting clarity as we build an integrated marketing organization. How do we win in the marketplace? What are our key personas? Why do they buy us? All of that. So that ends up becoming, as marketers often talk about, whether it's T-shaped or what your superpower is, for me, is getting super crisp on what are the problems we're trying to solve from a market perspective.
I love that. Yeah, it's so important to get people on the same page. And communication is definitely been more scattered with so many different platforms and other things. And Twilio's been a key player in really transforming that. How do you kind of get in the weeds and transform or approach marketing a product that's foundational, but also can be invisible, since it's a lot of it's on the dev side?
Yeah, I mean, it is one, just internally get aligned around what our go-to-market approach is. And I think one of the things that, one of the forcing functions that I had is product, marketing, and sales all on the same page around what we're trying to solve, and who our buyers and personas are. So that's one. But it's interesting. We have a very complex go-to-market that we've got to get aligned on. So we have a self-service business, bottoms up, developers. Millions of developers sort of start and test and learn and get their hands on our products, which is fantastic. We also have a very strong partner ecosystem where we have ISVs that embed the Twilio capabilities into their platforms, whether that's sales or marketing or product. Like, we're embedded in actually a lot of the technologies that people engage with every day, but maybe not know that we're under the hood around that. So we have a whole motion around how do we deal with ISVs that are customers, but also partners at that front. And then we have our enterprise and SMB mid-market business, where we go direct to customers as well. So I would describe it as a complex go-to-market. But if we don't build a marketing plan that addresses all of those routes to market and understand how we win, then it's difficult. So that's one of the big things that I've come in, is just making sure we're all aligned. How do we, again, going back to how do we win? Who are we selling to? Is product, sales, and marketing, are we all aligned? If not, then that's a huge problem.
It's really interesting that it really does come back to those core principles with every business, is like, talk to customers, where are we focused, where are we winning? And really, it can be such a simple thing, but sometimes we like to make it more complicated.
100%.
In a rapidly evolving industry, I'm seeing Twilio in the news quite a bit, acquiring new companies, big and small. And how do you kind of wrangle that all together and maintain a balance between innovation that can come with acquiring new companies, as well as not abandoning its core business?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think probably learn this in the world, with Adobe, where we really have this notion of like test and learn, right? And some of the things, and I implemented this at Box as well, where how do we iterate really, really quickly? Like, how does marketing become an agile organization, and not the full like agile methodology, but like, how are we quick to react? Because the industry and the market is changing every day, and we have to be part of that. So, implementing a test and learn, right? We should be data driven with everything we do, but we can't lose sight of the art as well, right? It becomes very easy to get hooked on the things that we can measure, versus the things, like I was having a conversation with another marketer this morning, where it's incredibly hard to measure the value of awareness and a lot of the brand stuff you're doing. So in a world where marketers are being pushed to do more with less and to get more efficient, the natural inclination is to go focus on things that are highly measurable. So you have to balance that out, where you have to have some conviction that says, hey, we have got to drive awareness as a business. It may not be as clean and measurable as we want, but we have to have belief that there's importance around that. So test and learn as we build our approach. We celebrate both wins and losses. I think that's really important because you're going to do a lot of tests that just don't work, and you should be like, great, we tried it, didn't work. That's okay. As part of it. So we're constantly trying to push and challenge ourselves. I really hate this notion of like, oh, well, we tried that, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? It's a different market. We have broader products. We've got, the industry's changing, like all of those things. So I think that's the other thing. And then I think the important thing as well is we don't have all the answers, and we need to learn from our peers. And so I do a lot of conversations with peers, just trying to understand and ask questions like, well, what's working for you, right? How can we learn? Like, what is a cool, innovative thing you're doing, right, that we might be able to learn from? And I'm encouraging my teams to do that as well, because it's just like constantly changing. And if we're not evolving, then, we're falling behind 100%.
That's so crucial. Yeah, I love having that kind of network. I know you and I have had some conversations. I've talked with a lot of other former Adobe folks and other people from my network that have been in marketing lead roles and just trying to figure out different angles, different things, figuring things out. What are some, like, you talk about data-driven marketing. What are kind of some of the, wildly important metrics that you care most about? MQLs, pipeline, revenue. What is kind of your magic focus?
Yeah, my team jokes about this a lot, right? And I ultimately think about how do we grow the business as a marketing organization. And I talk about a lot around, are we driving growth, right? And how does marketing become a growth driver for the business? And I think too many times as marketers, we get caught in our own head around the things that we optimize and we can control, right? A perfect example is MQLs. And I can go hit my MQL number very simply. I mean, hell, I could just change the way that we're calculating that and driving more and more. But ultimately, if it doesn't lead to a growth opportunity, revenue, right, for the business, then we're missing the mark. And so this is one of the things I feel very strongly about. MQLs are important, but you shouldn't be optimizing on MQLs. You should be optimizing on, are those MQLs converting into, whether you call them SALs, SQLs, or whatever, and is that actually converting into revenue? Because I think what happens, and this is the challenge with a lot of digital initiatives that we've had over the last few years, is everyone gets hooked because digital is like, hey, it creates MQLs. It's very measurable. I can work through it, and I can justify where we're spending dollars. But that's gotten less efficient over time. So how do we work through that? So again, it's not just about the things that marketing can measure. It's about driving growth of the business. And I think as more and more marketers take a step back and they say, how am I helping the business grow versus how am I optimizing on my marketing metrics? I think that's just a very different philosophy that I think more and more marketers need to think about.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, especially you mentioned earlier with, budgets being asked to do more with less. You really have to be pretty scrappy and not just be focused on leads, and how they can be obviously a leading metric for revenue.
Yeah, 100%. And then obviously we think through, how do from a awareness perspective, what's our perception in the marketplace? How do customers perceive us as a company, as a brand? Are customers getting value out of the capabilities? That's one of the other big things. It's not just as marketers, we shouldn't just be thinking about how do we drive net new, whether that's customers or opportunities, but how are existing customers? Are they getting value? Are we helping retain them? I think that's a critical piece because revenue can either grow from new revenue or retaining more of the revenue that you have already. And so that's another thing we push on is, how do we, as marketers, how do we help our existing customers get more value out of the capabilities we have, that they have from us?
How would you I want to ask a little bit more about that. So we're in this contraction hell, of B2B where everybody's contracting on each other, just to kind of weather some storms. How would you try and measure marketing's effectiveness on retention? Say you create a sales deck or a training. Is it looking at upsells? Is it looking at just net retention in general and how marketing affected that? How do you try and measure that or show impact?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the age-old question around customer marketing. What is customer marketing,
Right.
right? And it kind of falls into a couple of buckets. It's, how do you build advocates around your brand, and so that they're speaking on behalf, and you build sort of the community on that front. Then there's the customer marketing from a upsell, cross-sell perspective, right? How do we take existing customers and sell them more? And then the third bucket is really just around retention and like how do we ensure that we retain the dollars that we've got. Um, the third one is probably the most important because your sales team is doing the second one, right? They should be looking at their base, trying to figure out how do I sell them more and cross sell as part of that. And the CS organization is always, on the hook for driving, retention of these customers, but they don't have all the dollars and know-how and the tools to help. So this is really important where we think through, okay, what's our event strategy? Do we have at-risk customers coming to our event to hear our broader story? Are we doing digital events so that they can understand how they get more value out of the capabilities, where it's this notion of adoption, right? Get ahead of it and see, are we touching the majority of revenue? If we've got customers that are red in our health scores, are we engaging them? We should be, right? But I think, one of the things, for instance, when you look at a lot of our marketing programs, we measure that success by, are we building more pipeline? It has to be broader than that, right? In this new world, it should be like, are we creating new opportunities in pipeline? Yes. Are we helping deals accelerate faster? Yes. Are we building relationships that we don't have with customers where there may not be an opportunity on the play? Yes. And then are we helping existing customers understand how to drive more value out of their investment? Yeah. So I think you have to think about that holistically across everything that we do, not just be single threaded on, are we building more pipeline for the business?
Totally. I love that. I want to kind of shift into just like leadership in general. How as a CMO, it's such a great time because you're coming in, so you've got like fresh perspective, but you've also built kind of this great strategy and people are excited. And how do you kind of come in and foster a culture of creativity, collaboration? Obviously also like you're establishing your credibility again. That's one of the hard things of leaving a company is you're like, okay, I gotta like show people that I actually know what I'm doing here. What's kind of your strategy to really get people behind you and foster that collaboration, especially in like remote work? It's a little harder.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it is incredibly difficult when you've established internally your own credibility and brand to move to a new organization, and have to start over again. And I think it's natural. It's natural as we come in, we want to put our own stamp on like, where we should play. I think for me, the way that I always approach it is really take a step back and listen and appreciate of how we got here. Because I think too often it's easy, you sort of come in as a new leader and you're like, oh, this is all broken, I'm here to fix it, and just do what I say and like I'll solve it. Like that is, I don't have any of the history and the context part of that. So I think there's a world where you've got to create I would say create a culture of transparency and trust, but you've got to earn that trust. And I think as leaders, we need to be vulnerable that we don't have all the answers. Right. And so, one of the things when I took over both at Box and in Twilio is establishing that leadership, getting the transparency out on the table, what's working, what's not working, and be clear, like I'm an expert in one thing, but as marketers, like you literally cannot be an expert across all of the disciplines that we have to, engage in. And you've got to trust your leaders, right? Whether they're existing or you bring in new, to help you on that. So I think that's the critical part is like start to build a leadership team that feels empowered, trusted, appreciate the history before you start wanting to change all of it, and then get everyone's bought in alignment that this is where we're going together as part of that. So I think that's been my approach, and a few months in, and I think we've got a good game plan and a good leadership team that's starting to build the future.
I love that. There's a few executives I know who have fizzled out quickly after going to a company and being like a bull in a china shop and like losing the family, right? Like telling them how many things they did wrong and like, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? And yeah, it's such a critical thing to get people on your side.
Well, and I think too, you've got to have adaptability around this as well, where your playbook of what you've used in the past may not always work.
Yep.
And so that's the thing, is you got to take the time to evaluate. Like, for instance, I joined and I inherited an org structure that I kind of thought it was probably not where it was going to be, but I took a few months to really spend the time with the teams and the people and the challenges that we had, to really seek to understand like why we got here, what the history was, what the strengths and weaknesses of the whole leadership team. And then a few months later, do an org structure change where, based on what we need as a business, versus it would have been very easy for me to come in on, first week saying, hey, I don't love this. Like, this is a new structure. We're going to go put people in place. But then I wouldn't have had the buy-in from the org of where we're headed and be very thoughtful around it. So, don't necessarily, like, you'll have tools in your toolbox, but don't assume that everything's a hammer and like I solve it the same way at any company I've ever been at.
Well, and it's such a good opportunity to evaluate talent too, right? Like, there's so many times, Adobe is another example just of a big company. Like, I had a new leader come in, they interviewed me, and they actually, a couple of times put me in different seats because they're like, hey, this guy's got some talent. I think he could do more here than he's doing there. And so you're like getting people in the right seats. You're keeping them happy. If they've been in a role for 3 years, 4 years, and they're ready for something different, it gives you an opportunity to make those changes and kind of fit in. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I think that's an important one where, we haven't sort of hit on it, but this balance of generalists versus specialists, and, how do you become a more well-rounded marketer? How do you make bets on individuals that may not have the core like that as their specialization, but give them an opportunity. And I think for me, if you look at my background, I'm very much a generalist by nature. And I love the fact that, let's make bets on individuals, right? If they're smart, they're hardworking, they're asked lots of questions, they'll figure this stuff out.
Yep.
But I think the natural inclination as leaders is we want to go get the best person for that specialization to go solve that role. But in some cases, it might be someone internal in your org that may not have that experience, but they understand the institutional, how stuff gets done. And I've got a great example, on my leadership team where I put her in a new role, a few weeks ago, and man, she is doing incredible right out of the gate.
That's awesome. Yeah. It brings so much confidence, so much excitement, and really just, builds momentum. What trends do you see as critical for like future marketing, but also Twilio in general? You've been kind of noodling for 90 days on the messaging and other things. Where do you see kind of Twilio making its impact as, again, like one of these rising stars in tech, and keeping up with trends?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing. We haven't really talked about AI yet. This might be a new record of how long it's into that.
I was holding off as long as I could.
But if you think about it, it will change everything, right? And I think this is, as an organization, like one of the things we believe with Twilio, we believe data is going to be critically important, right? It's why we bought Segment from a CDP perspective. So we think contextual data is going to be really, really important in the future. For us, we have all the communications channels. So, how do you engage with customers across, regardless of how they engage with a brand? And we think AI will be sort of the glue that starts to tie some of that together. But I think more broadly as marketers, we really need to figure out, how to embrace this and to give us scale. Like one of the things that we've both been guilty of, we've talked about personalization for years and years and years. But as consumers, one of the things we're trying to fix is, how many times have you actually had a great experience with a brand that you were like, wow, they really understood and they heard me? And the reality is it's very few, and it's shocking when it actually happens. Like we've gotten so conditioned. I was telling a story the other day where like I checked into a hotel, large chain, and the extent of the personalization was literally like my name on the television. And I'm like, wow, they know that I'm staying in this room. but I've stayed hundreds of nights
Yeah.
in this hotel. They literally know when I check out what I want to order for room service, that I love, I drink lots of coffee, and that I always run out and I have to call back down saying, hey, can you give me some more pods as part of that? Like, they have all that data on me, but they're not actually using it to create a better experience. And it's just like, I think as brands, we can do a much better job. So I think the future in AI helps enable that, right? Whether that is understanding data, making predictions, creating those personalized experiences, like that's the future of where we're headed. And I think as marketers, we just need to get our head wrapped around like the way that we did it in the past is going to change. And I would encourage everyone to start to get themselves up to speed on this new technology of where it's headed, what it's good at, where we can start embracing it and start using it in our everyday life, because it's just going to make us such a force multiplier in the industry that I think is pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's just like it's such a scale thing to your point. Like, yeah, these big companies, hotels, a great example. Millions of people stay there, but especially if you're relying on business travelers are having 50 nights a year and have expectations. I mean, if you're a loyalty person, you're probably complaining of something, and you're pulling the, hey, I'm a platinum member card.
Right. But think about the data. Ultimately, if you really took a step back and you understood, every conversation I have with, if I've got to go change a reservation, all the interactions I got from a digital perspective, what my likelihood to order room service, at what time do I order room service?
Yeah.
Is it in the morning? Is it at dinner? What's the in-room experience? Like all of those things are just contextual data that as a brand and a marketer, we could be leveraging in a world. And I think technically it's just been hard to go do that at scale. And we really believe that like personalization at scale is possible. And that's where we want to go solve that in the future.
I love that. I love that focus. Cool. Any kind of parting words to future of tech, anyone in marketing that might be interested in your thoughts before we end our conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. If I take a step back, I find the best marketers are naturally curious, and this is a craft that I would describe it as the most cross-disciplined, because I think if you think about the scale of what marketing organizations look like, be curious, ask lots of questions, network a lot, and learn the different disciplines, because I think in the future, marketing will be and should be growth drivers of the business. And so, press yourselves to learn more, get outside your comfort zone, and don't wait for someone else to give you the enablement. Go seek it yourself and just get better.
I love it. Love it. Awesome. Thanks for your words today, Chris. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everyone.